Professor He stood at the viewing window of the Galactic Council's transport ship, watching Earth grow larger in the distance. The blue planet looked peaceful from space, but he knew better. After 20 years of studying Earth, he understood why it was called a death world. Behind him, 12 alien students from different safe worlds shuffled nervously. This was their first time seeing Earth in person. They came from planets where the weather never changed much, where gravity stayed constant, and where natural disasters didn't exist. Professor called out one of his students, Yumki, whose purple scales shimmered under the ship's lights. "Is it true that Earth has moving ground?" "Yes," He answered, turning to face the group. "They call them earthquakes. The entire planet's surface is made of moving pieces." He watched as his students' eyes widened. Some of them had extra eyes, and others had sensing organs that humans didn't have, but they all showed the same look of surprise. The ship's computer announced their arrival at the Antarctic Research Station. This was the safest place to start their Earth studies, or at least that's what He had told the Galactic Academic Council. He knew that even here, Earth could show its teeth at any moment. Dr. Li Jinwu, their human guide, was waiting for them in the station's landing bay. He wore a thick winter coat even though they were inside. The aliens found this strange. Their environmental suits should have been enough to keep any creature comfortable. "Welcome to Earth," Dr. Li said with a smile. "I hope your journey was good." He spoke in simple galactic standard, making sure all the students could understand him. Yumki raised his hand. "Why are you wearing extra protection inside the station?" Dr. Li laughed. This isn't protection. This is just to keep warm. Humans like different temperatures. Some of us get cold easily." The students looked at each other in confusion. On their worlds, everyone liked the same temperature. The idea that creatures from one species could prefer different conditions was new to them. He watched as Dr. Li led them through the station. The human pointed out safety features that seemed extreme to the aliens: emergency shelters, backup power systems, and multiple escape routes. One student, my son, who came from a water world and moved around in a floating sphere of liquid, asked why they needed so many safety measures. "Because on Earth, things can change very quickly," Dr. Li explained. "Right now, it's a calm day. The temperature outside is only -40 degrees Celsius, and the wind is just 30 kilometers per hour. But tomorrow could be different. Only -40. Asked He, hiding a smile. He knew what was coming. The students didn't understand why their professors were acting like this was normal. On their homeworlds, a temperature change of even 5 degrees would be big news. A change of 40 degrees would mean the end of their world. As they reached the main research area, alarms started beeping. Dr. Li checked his computer tablet and frowned. "Looks like we might get an early lesson in Earth weather," he said. "The sensors are picking up a storm system moving in from the west." The alien students gathered around the window, excited to see their first Earth storm. Professor He and Dr. Li exchanged knowing looks. These young aliens still thought of Earth as just another planet. They didn't understand that they were standing on a world that could kill them in 100 different ways. "How bad will it be?" He asked quietly. "Nothing too serious," Dr. Li replied. "Just 100-mile-per-hour winds and a temperature drop of about 30 degrees. Should be a good introduction for them." He nodded. Sometimes the best way to learn was through experience. His students were about to get their first real lesson about why Earth was classified as a death world, and this was just the beginning. The morning after their arrival, the alien students gathered in the station's main observation room. The storm from yesterday had passed without much excitement, which made some of them wonder if Earth's reputation was exaggerated. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the white Antarctic landscape stretching far into the distance. Kang Mai-Ray, a student whose crystalline body sparkled in the morning light, pressed her outer membrane against the window. "It looks so peaceful," she said, "like the ice plains of my home world." But unlike her home world, where the ice was always the same, she noticed the Antarctic ice moved and changed. Dr. Lee walked into the room carrying several devices. "Today, we'll learn about Earth's basic weather patterns," he announced. "But first, let's go through some safety rules." Yumki raised one of his tentacles. "Safety rules for studying weather. On my planet, we just look at the sky." Several other students nodded in agreement. "On Earth," Dr. Lee explained, "weather can kill you before you even realize it's dangerous." He held up what looked like a simple wristband. "These are emergency beacons. You must wear them at all times. If anything happens, press the red button and help will come." Professor Heijin watched as his students exchanged worried looks. He remembered his first visit to Earth, how he had thought the humans were being overly careful. That was before he saw his first hurricane. "Now," Dr. Lee continued, "let's talk about Earth's atmosphere." He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's air composition. "Your environmental suits will protect you, but Earth's air is actually poisonous to most galactic life forms. It contains about 21% oxygen, which is highly reactive." My son's water sphere rippled with surprise. "Oxygen? In the air? How do humans survive?" "We don't just survive," Dr. Lee smiled. "We need oxygen to live. Our bodies evolved to use this poison as fuel." The students took notes, their various appendages moving quickly across their data pads. This was unlike anything they had learned before. On their worlds, oxygen was stored safely underground or deep in the oceans. Later that day, they had their first outdoor experience. Dr. Lee led them to a small research area just outside the station. Even though the weather was calm by Earth standards, the wind still howled around them at 30 kilometers per hour, and the temperature was minus 35 degrees Celsius. "This is what we call a nice day," Dr. Lee said through the communication system. The students couldn't tell if he was joking. Professor Heijin watched as Kang Mai-Rei used her crystalline body to study the ice beneath them. Her people could absorb and analyze materials directly through their outer layer. Suddenly, she pulled back in shock. "Professor," she called out, "this ice, it's moving." "Yes," Heijin replied. "Earth's ice is always moving. These glaciers flow like very slow rivers. They can crack open without warning, creating deep crevices." The students huddled closer together. The peaceful white landscape suddenly seemed more threatening. Dr. Lee pointed to some nearby mountains. Those were created by the planet's crust pushing together over millions of years, the same forces that make earthquakes. As they continued their observations, a low rumbling sound echoed across the ice. Some of the students activated their emergency beacons in panic, but Dr. Lee remained calm. "That's just an ice sheet cracking," he explained. "Completely normal here. Wait until you hear the really big ones." Professor Heijin noticed how his students stayed closer to the station after that. Their first impressions of Earth as a calm, peaceful world were beginning to crack, just like the ice beneath their feet. But this was just the start of their education. Soon they would learn why Earth's animals, including humans, had evolved to be so tough. The real lessons hadn't even begun. 1 week into their Earth studies, the alien students were starting to adjust to life at the Antarctic Research Station. They had learned to check the weather monitors every morning and to always wear their emergency beacons, but they still didn't fully understand why Earth was considered so dangerous. That morning, Dr. Lee was teaching them about Earth's atmospheric pressure systems. Yumki, who had been the most skeptical about Earth's dangers, was drawing patterns in his data pad with his tentacles. "As you can see," Dr. Lee explained, pointing to the weather map, "low pressure systems often bring storms." He paused as one of the monitoring systems started to make a soft beeping sound. Professor Heijin moved to check the readings. His outer membrane changed color slightly, a sign of concern that his students noticed immediately. "Is something wrong, Professor?" my son asked from inside her water sphere. Before Heijin could answer, more alarms started going off. The soft beeping turned into a loud warning sound. Dr. Li rushed to the main computer terminal, his fingers moving quickly across the controls. "Class is dismissed," he announced firmly. "Everyone needs to return to their quarters immediately." Kang Mi-Ray pressed her crystalline form against the observation window. "But the sky looks clear," she said. "I can't see any danger." "That's exactly what makes Earth so dangerous," Dr. Li explained as he started shutting down non-essential systems. "By the time you can see the danger, it's often too late." The station's AI system began making announcements. "Warning. Category 4 polar storm approaching. All personnel proceed to secure locations." "This is not a drill." Yum Ki waved his tentacles in disagreement. "We have storms on my world too. They're not that dangerous. Maybe we could stay and observe this one for our research." Professor Heijin's color changed to a deep warning shade. "Yum Ki, on your world, a strong storm means wind speeds of 30 kilometers per hour. The storm heading toward us has winds of over 200 kilometers per hour. The temperature will drop to levels that could freeze your environmental suit's systems." The students looked at each other nervously. They had never experienced anything like this before. On their homeworlds, such conditions were impossible. Dr. Li started guiding them toward the secure bunker area. "The storm will hit in approximately 40 minutes. We need to secure everything and get to safety." Through the windows, they could see human staff members moving quickly but calmly, following practiced emergency procedures. They were securing equipment and closing protective shields over the station's outer sections. As they walked to the secure area, the students noticed something strange. The humans weren't panicking. Instead, they seemed to treat this like a normal event. "Does this happen often?" my son asked, her water sphere rippling with anxiety. "Often enough," Dr. Li replied while checking his tablet. "This will be the third major storm this month. It's actually been quite calm lately." The students watched in amazement as the human staff completed their preparations. Even the youngest human workers knew exactly what to do. They moved with the confidence that came from living on a world where such dangers were normal. Professor Heijin gathered his students in the secure bunker. Through the reinforced walls, they could hear the wind beginning to pick up speed. The peaceful Antarctic morning was transforming into something much more dangerous. "Now," Heijin said, his color returning to normal, "you're about to learn why Earth earned its Deathworld classification. Pay attention. This is not something you'll find in any textbook." The lights flickered as the first strong winds hit the station. The real lesson was about to begin. The storm hit the Antarctic Research Station with tremendous force. Inside the secure bunker, the alien students huddled together as the walls vibrated from the impact of the wind. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard before, a deep, constant roar mixed with high-pitched howling. "The wind speed has reached 220 kilometers per hour," Dr. Li announced, checking the monitoring systems. "Temperature outside is now minus 100 degrees Celsius with the wind chill." Yum Ki, who had been skeptical about Earth's dangers, wrapped his tentacles tightly around his environmental suit's control panel. "How can anything survive in these conditions?" he asked, his voice shaking. Through the bunker's reinforced observation window, they could see their research shuttle. The vessel, designed to withstand the pressures of deep space, was shaking in the wind. Suddenly, a piece of ice the size of a small car flew through the air and struck the shuttle's side. The shuttle. My son's water sphere rippled violently with distress. "It's damaged." Professor Heijin remained calm. "This is why we secured it with extra anchors," he explained. "On Earth, you must always prepare for the worst." The lights flickered again, and several emergency systems activated automatically. Red warning lights began flashing in the corridor outside the bunker. Dr. Li's tablet displayed new alerts. "The main power grid is struggling," he said. "We're switching to backup systems now." He pressed several buttons on his control panel. "This is standard procedure during major storms." Kang Mi-Ray, her crystalline form vibrating from the storm's low frequencies, started recording data. "The energy in this storm She said, "It's more powerful than our planet's strongest earthquakes." The storm continued to intensify. The students watched as the visibility outside dropped to zero. The world beyond their windows became a white blur of snow and ice, illuminated occasionally by the emergency lights. "Look at the temperature readings," Professor Heijin instructed his students. "Notice how quickly they're changing. On Earth, conditions can become lethal in minutes." A loud cracking sound echoed through the station. Several students activated their emergency beacons in panic, but Dr. Lee quickly reassured them. "That's just the ice sheet shifting," he explained. "The pressure from the storm can cause the glacier to move faster than usual. The station is designed to handle this." The students observed the human staff members working calmly at their stations, monitoring systems, and making adjustments. These humans had lived through many such storms. What seemed like a catastrophe to the aliens was just another day on Earth for them. "Professor," Young-Ki asked, his skepticism completely gone, "how do humans deal with this kind of weather all the time?" "They adapted," Heijin replied. "Humans evolved on this world. Their bodies and minds developed to handle rapid changes and extreme conditions. What seems impossible to us is normal for them." The storm raged on for hours. The alien students watched and recorded everything, beginning to understand why their comfortable, predictable worlds had produced such different life forms from Earth. "Remember," Dr. Lee said as another ice boulder flew past the window, "this is just an Antarctic storm. Wait until you learn about hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, and earthquakes." The students looked at him in shock. The idea that there were even more powerful forces on Earth seemed impossible, but they were starting to learn that on this planet, the impossible happened every day. Through the howling wind and cracking ice, they were getting their first real lesson about life on a Deathworld. And this was only the beginning. As the storm entered its fifth hour, the Antarctic Research Station's main power grid finally failed. The backup generators activated immediately, but several critical systems began showing warning signs. Emergency lights cast red shadows through the corridors, creating an eerie atmosphere. Dr. Lee studied the station's diagnostic screens with growing concern. "The main heating system is struggling," he announced. "We need to get it back online before the temperature drops too low inside the station." The alien students watched as the human staff responded to the crisis. There was no panic, no confusion, just coordinated action. Park Min-ho, the station's chief engineer, was already putting on his environmental suit. "You're not going outside, are you?" my son asked, her water sphere clouding with worry. "The storm is still at full strength." "Someone has to fix the external heating units," Park replied calmly while checking his suit's seals. "Otherwise, the station's internal temperature will drop too low for comfortable survival." Professor Heijin noticed how his students reacted to the word comfortable. On their worlds, any survival would be impossible in these conditions. Yet here was a human, preparing to walk out into the storm just to maintain comfort levels. "I'll go with Engineer Park," Dr. Lee said, already suiting up. "We work better in pairs during storms." The students gathered around the airlock window as the two humans prepared to exit. They watched in amazement as Park and Lee performed their final equipment checks with practiced ease. This wasn't the first time they had done this. "Vital signs monitoring active," the station's AI announced. "External temperature minus 105 degrees Celsius. Wind speed 235 kilometers per hour. Visibility 2 meters. Young-Ki's tentacles twisted nervously. "Those conditions would kill any creature from my world instantly," he said. "Humans are built differently," Professor Heijin explained. "Their bodies can endure extreme conditions, and their minds are adapted to function under high stress." Through the window, they watched as Park and Lee stepped into the storm. The humans moved slowly but steadily, using guide ropes to navigate. The wind threw ice crystals against their suits with such force that the impacts were visible as small flashes of light. Kang Mai-Rei used her crystalline form to analyze the energy readings. "The force hitting their suits," she said in disbelief. It's like being hit by thousands of micrometeors every second. The humans reached the external heating unit. Working together, they began repairs despite the horrible conditions. Their movements were careful but confident. When a particularly strong gust of wind hit them, they simply braced themselves and continued working. Look at their vital signs, Professor He-jin instructed his students. The monitors showed elevated heart rates and increased adrenaline levels, but nothing dangerous. Their bodies are stressed, but not overwhelmed. This is normal for them. After 20 minutes of intense work, the heating system came back online. The humans made their way back to the airlock, covered in ice but otherwise unharmed. As they removed their suits, the students noticed they were even making jokes about the experience. "Just another day at the office," Park said with a smile, brushing ice off his suit. The alien students looked at each other in amazement. They were beginning to understand that human resilience wasn't just about physical strength. It was about adapting to and working in conditions that would paralyze other species with fear. "Remember this moment," Professor He-jin told his students. "You just witnessed why Earth creatures, especially humans, are considered some of the toughest beings in the galaxy. While we hide from such conditions, they face them head-on." The storm continued to rage outside, but the station was warm again, thanks to two humans who saw impossible conditions as just another challenge to overcome. The station's emergency alarm system activated again, but this time it was different. Instead of weather warnings, a red emergency light flashed above the communications panel. Dr. Lee rushed to answer the incoming call, his face becoming serious as he listened. "We have a situation," he announced to the room. "The backup research team in Station B has lost power. Their heating systems are failing." He paused, looking at the weather readings. "They have approximately 2 hours before their shelter becomes too cold for survival." The alien students watched as Choi Soo-min, the station's rescue specialist, immediately began preparing equipment. She moved with quick, precise movements, checking oxygen tanks and survival gear. "But Station B is 5 kilometers away," Young Ki said, his tentacles moving anxiously. "The storm is still at full strength. No one can travel in these conditions." Professor He-jin noticed how none of the humans seemed to share the aliens' concern. Instead, they were focused on preparing for the rescue mission. They worked together like parts of a well-maintained machine. "Team of 4, Choi announced, checking her tablet. "We'll take the modified snow crawler. Park, Lee, you're with me. Jong, you'll monitor from here." She looked at the weather display. "The wind is down to 200 kilometers per hour. That's our window." The alien students gathered around Professor He-jin. "They cannot be serious," my son said, her water sphere showing patterns of distress. "The temperature would freeze their vehicle systems." "Watch and learn," He-jin replied. "This is why humans are considered exceptional among spacefaring species." The rescue team suited up in reinforced cold weather gear. Each piece of equipment was checked 3 times. They moved quickly but carefully, following practiced procedures. The aliens noticed how they communicated with hand signals and short phrases, saving time and energy. Through the observation window, the students watched the snow crawler emerge from its bay. The vehicle looked like a cross between a tank and a submarine, designed specifically for Earth's harshest conditions. "The crawler can only move at 10 kilometers per hour in these conditions," Dr. Jung explained from the control room. "The rescue team will be exposed to the storm for at least 1 hour each way." The alien students used their various sensory organs to monitor the rescue operation. Kang Mi-Ray's crystalline form detected the intense pressure changes around the crawler. Yum Ki's tentacles sensed vibrations through the ice that would shatter less sturdy vehicles. "Their heart rates are elevated but stable," Professor He-jin noted, watching the medical readouts. "Notice how they maintain focus despite the conditions." The crawler disappeared into the white void of the storm. For 30 minutes, the only sign of the rescue team was their steady communication with the control room. Their voices remained calm as they reported increasingly dangerous conditions. "Ice sheet showing signs of cracking," Choi's voice came through the radio. Adjusting route north by 20 degrees. Ground temperature dropping to minus 120 degrees, Park reported. Activating secondary heating systems. The aliens listened in amazement as the humans worked through problems that would have stopped any rescue attempt on their worlds. When the crawlers' front lights failed, the team continued using backup systems. When ice formations blocked their planned route, they found another way. This is why Earth creatures are unique, Professor He-jin explained to his students. They don't just survive in impossible conditions, they help others survive too. On their world, leaving someone behind has never been an acceptable option. The rescue mission was far from over, but the alien students were already learning their most important lesson about Earth's inhabitants. Humans didn't just endure their death world, they mastered it. The rescue team returned to the main station 12 hours later. They'd brought back all 6 researchers from Station B, along with their critical research data. Despite the dangerous conditions, not a single life was lost. The alien students watched in silence as the humans helped their rescued colleagues out of the snow crawler. The temperature dropped to minus 140 degrees during the return journey, Park reported while removing his frozen suit. The crawler's main engine nearly failed twice, but we adapted and kept moving. Professor He-jin gathered his students in the main lecture hall after the rescue team had rested. It was time to help them understand what they had witnessed. The room was quieter than usual. Even Yum-ki's usually restless tentacles were still. What you saw today, He-jin began, was just one type of challenge that Earth presents. This planet tests its inhabitants constantly, forcing them to adapt or perish. Dr. Lee joined them, bringing up images on the main screen. This storm, he explained, was actually quite mild by Earth standards. Let me show you what humans deal with across our planet. The screen displayed images of different Earth environments. The students saw massive hurricanes that could swallow their home cities whole. They watched videos of volcanoes spewing rivers of molten rock. They saw earthquakes splitting the ground open in waves taller than buildings crashing into coastlines. Each of these events would destroy life on our worlds. My son said, her water sphere reflecting the images in distorted patterns. Yet humans live in all these places. Not only do they live there, Professor He-jin replied, they build their cities there. They study these forces. They learn to predict them, to work with them, and sometimes even to use them for their benefit. Kang Mai-rei's crystalline form vibrated with realization. Their technology, she said, it's not just advanced. It's tough. Everything they build has to survive these conditions. Exactly, Dr. Lee nodded. Our buildings, our vehicles, our tools, they all evolved alongside us. Earth taught us to build things as resilient as we are. The screen showed more images, humans diving in deep oceans, climbing frozen mountains, crossing burning deserts. The alien students began to understand that the rescue mission they witnessed wasn't exceptional for humans. It was normal. Think about what this means, Professor He-jin continued. Every human who has ever lived has faced Earth's challenges. Their bodies adapted to handle extreme pressure changes, temperature swings, and varying gravity. Their minds evolved to stay calm in conditions that would terrify other species. Yum-ki, who had once doubted Earth's dangers, raised a tentacle. Is this why humans are so successful in space exploration? Because their home world prepared them for anything. Now you're understanding, Dr. Lee smiled. When we first went to space, we found most environments less challenging than Earth. Other species evolved in constant, predictable conditions. We evolved in chaos. The storm outside was finally beginning to calm down. Through the windows, the students could see the damage it had caused. Equipment was buried under snow, and ice had reshaped the landscape. But the station stood firm, and its human inhabitants were already planning repairs. Remember, Professor He-jin concluded, Earth is not just a death world because it's dangerous. It's a death world because it never stops being dangerous. And that constant challenge created one of the most adaptable species in the galaxy. The alien students looked at their human teachers with new respect. They finally understood that humans weren't just surviving on a death world. They were shaped by it, tempered by it, turned into something unique in the universe. 1 month after the Great Storm, the alien students prepared to leave Earth. The Antarctic Research Station looked different now. Repairs had been completed, and new safety measures were in place. But the biggest changes were in the students themselves. Professor Heijin watched as his students packed their research equipment. None of them were the same beings who had arrived 4 weeks ago. Their final reports showed a deep understanding of Earth and its inhabitants that went far beyond academic knowledge. "I have something to show you before you leave," Dr. Lee announced. He led them to the station's main computer room. "We've collected all the data from your time here." The screens lit up with graphs and charts. They showed how the students' heart rates and stress levels had changed over their stay. At first, they had panicked at every environmental warning. By the end, they remained calm even during serious emergencies. "You've started to adapt," Professor Heijin explained. "Not physically, like humans did, but mentally. You learned to live on a death world." Kang Meirei stepped forward, her crystalline form now showing patterns that matched Earth's weather data. "I've analyzed the materials humans use in their buildings," she said. "They're not just strong, they're flexible. They bend instead of breaking, just like humans do." Yumki, whose tentacles once moved in constant worry, now showed the steady movements of someone who understood his environment. "On my world, we try to control nature," he said. "Humans learn to work with it instead. They don't fight their planet. They dance with it." My son's water sphere had changed too. She had adjusted its composition to better handle Earth's pressure changes. "I understand now why humans explore space so freely," she said. "After Earth, most planets must seem peaceful to them." Dr. Lee brought up one final display, a map of Earth showing all its different environments. "You've only experienced one small part of our world," he said. "There are places where the air is so thin you can barely breathe, and others where the pressure could crush your bones. There are deserts hot enough to melt metal, and oceans that never see light. And humans live in all these places," one of the students asked. "We do more than live," Dr. Lee smiled. "We build cities, raise families, create art, and do research. Every challenge Earth presents, we meet with innovation and determination." Professor Heijin gathered his students for one final lesson. "When you return to your home worlds," he said, "many will ask why Earth is classified as a death world. Tell them this: it's not the dangers that make Earth special. It's what those dangers created." The students looked out at the Antarctic landscape one last time. The same view that had once seemed frighteningly alien now felt almost familiar. They had learned to see beauty in its harsh power. "Earth is not just a planet," Heijin continued. "It's a forge. Every life form here is tested constantly, shaped by countless challenges. The humans you met aren't just survivors. They're masterpieces, crafted by millions of years of Earth's toughest trials." As they boarded their transport ship, the students took one last look at the research station. They saw the humans continuing their work, calmly facing conditions that would terrify most species in the galaxy. "Remember," Professor Heijin said as the ship prepared for departure, "the harshest teachers often give the most valuable lessons. Earth taught its children to be strong, adaptable, and resilient. But most importantly, it taught them to never stop learning, never stop trying, and never give up." The ship lifted off, leaving Earth behind. But the lessons of the death world would stay with them forever.